This is the Cessna Citation 10. Slide them out and swivel them around. Everything is lined in wood.
We like them to be engine started in 2 minutes and rolling in 4 minutes.
Sorry, rolling in 4 minutes.
4 minutes from the time that the car shows up.
Wow.
And that's kind of how it's done. You know, again, these are time machines and we're selling time.
Hey everybody, in this video we're going to show you what it's like to fly private and everything you need to know about some of the greatest private jets on the planet. So I'm here with Brian Kendrick with Premier Air Charter, and Brian is going to be our guide today to everything aircraft, because you've been in this industry for a long time.
Yeah, almost 40 years now.
Wow.
It's been a long day.
Unbelievable. Now, I think a lot of you out there, like myself, are very airplane curious, but it's a big world with a lot of ins and outs, and you're going to kind of guide us through those, and we're going to talk about some cool airplanes.
Well, thank you for coming, first of all. And yeah, we're going to talk about a couple of different airplanes. Behind us here is the Citation 10. It's classed as a super mid. It carries 8 people. And when this airplane was built in the early 90s, up through, in fact, they still build them, it was the fastest corporate jet built, and it would go Mach 9.2, which is just a little over 700 miles an hour.
So in the world of corporate jets, where does this fall size-wise? Is this on the small end, the larger end?
This is considered and classed as a super mid. You go at the bottom end of the scale of the VLJ, which is just a very small airplane, usually 4 seats, no lavatory. Then the light jet, which we'll talk about here in a minute, and then a mid-size, and then this is a little bit larger than the mid-size, so they created its own space when this airplane came out as the super mid.
Wow.
And then above that you've got a heavy, like a Gulfstream 4, and then you've got something classed as a super heavy, which is like a Gulfstream 550, which goes all over the place. And then you have the BBJ, the Boeing business jet, which is literally a 737 with bedrooms, 1,500 square feet of space, and it'll take you anywhere in the world. At this airplane will go anywhere in the world, but the BBJs, if you're going to go to Europe or something like that, you're going to want a bigger airplane.
So let's walk around the back end here. We'll wait for this plane to move. So, Brian, in the world of jets here, talk me through the engine.
Okay.
Like how would you describe the engine on this plane?
That engine's huge. It's, as you can see, this is a Rolls-Royce motor built by the same people who build the cars.
Okay.
It's got a life of, I think this one has a 6,000 hour, what's called TBO, time between overhaul. This airplane was certified to go to 0.92 of Mach, which is over 700 miles an hour, just a touch. Wow. Most corporate jets run in the low to mid 8s, so like 8.0 to 8.5. Our little CJ over there runs at 6.1.
Okay.
So a lot slower.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a big difference. On a coast to coast, this airplane compared to like the Gulfstream is anywhere from a half hour to an hour faster. This airplane goes straight to 40,000 feet, and most, like, you remember when you fly on United, they say today we're going to go at 32,000 or whatever. That's where this stuff is, the weather. Right. This just goes right over the top and it just rockets along.
So we are here in San Diego today. Yeah. How far could you go on this plane? What's kind of the cruising range?
You can do Hawaii in this airplane.
No, you can't.
You can.
From here?
From here.
What?
Actually, the runway's just a little short, so what we do when we do Hawaii is we run up to Long Beach. Okay. And then off to Hawaii, and it's 4 hours and a touch in this airplane.
Why is the runway too short for Hawaii but not for...
Because of the weight.
Oh, interesting.
Corporate jets, you fuel for the trip. So this airplane right now is sitting with light fuel, and they're going to look and see how much we're going to fly it, and then they're going to fuel for that trip, and off they go, because they have to make sure that they're at a weight that allows them to come back and land, or they're above the landing weight of the airplane when they get to their next destination.
Interesting. Well, let's go hop inside so we don't get too soaked, and we'll go show you what's in there. So Brian, we stepped inside this airplane, and what a magnificent thing it is to spend time in here. So how many seats are in this?
This one has 8 or 9 seats, depending upon if you want to put somebody on the belted lavatory.
Okay.
We generally don't advertise the 9th seat, and the funniest thing is, generally the guy who's writing the check for the trip, that's where he goes, and I don't know why. because that seat right there is usually the captain's chair of the person who's running the trip.
Okay.
So you'll see all the controls for running the various audio visual. This airplane has TV screens that come out. It's also got Wi-Fi in it, so you can listen to music and stuff like that.
Is that standard on most airplanes, that one particular seat?
Well, it's just kind of the known seat. The forward-facing seat behind the co-pilot is generally where the main guy sits.
Interesting.
So they put all the controls there so he can, run the lights and run the heat, and he's got all the controls for the airplane from there.
So walk me through some of the features in here. So we have these big, comfy lounge seats. Do these recline?
They do. And like you can run the seat up, you could run the seat in that way, and then you can push this button and they go back. This one doesn't have a footrest that comes out. The big piece is where it's called lateral tracking, where you noticed we moved inboard.
Yeah, right.
To give us a little bit more room away from this.
Interesting.
Yeah, and this runs all these lights, and then there's also lights in here when we go out for the flight. You'll see all of that.
More forward, I noticed all this beautiful wood. What are in those little cubbies?
So that's the refreshment center, and
the refreshment center. I like that.
This is where the first officer gets to double as a flight attendant, because on the smaller airplanes you've got all your alcohols in there.
Yep.
And your coffee and hot water, all of your waters and sodas and all that stuff.
One of the biggest surprises for me on this experience is just how little hoops you have to go through to get airborne. So you pull up here, they help you unload your bags, they load them into the plane, and then you literally walk just a few feet up to the stairs here. You get in, and in a matter of minutes you can be flying. So there's no lines for ticketing or baggage check or security. You just drop your car off, they park it for you, you get on the plane, and off you go.
We like them to be engine started in 2 minutes and rolling in 4 minutes.
Sorry, rolling in 4 minutes?
4 minutes from the time that the car shows up.
Wow.
And that's kind of how it's done. Again, these are time machines, and we're selling time.
Right.
So that's what we do.
That's pretty wild.
That's good stuff.
Now, here's a question I've always wondered too. We're just going deep into the rabbit hole. If someone is like, can you get me to Phoenix quickly, will you fly the plane faster?
Yes.
No way.
Yeah.
You can fly the plane faster.
Yeah, we are most efficient faster, believe it or not, and it comes down to the fuel burn versus what it costs us to maintain the aircraft. On like the engine program, we pay by the hour. We schedule maintenance by the hour, so we tend to fly fast.
All right, so we're here with Micah, who is going to be one of our pilots today, and he's going to show us the startup process on this Citation 10, which is pretty cool. So I'll grab the camera from you. Now, Micah, to someone like me, this looks like the scariest group of switches in the history, but kind of give me an overview of what some of the things do.
Well, the first thing we have to do is start the auxiliary power unit.
Yep.
It's just, it helps us power the airplane on the ground so we can get things going. So it's basically another little small jet engine in the back of the plane that has its own generator, and it powers the aircraft before we turn on the engines. So we started, it's just an on switch over there.
Yep.
And we look here to make sure it's getting electrical power, and once we notice that it is, then we can turn on the rest of the power to the airplane.
Wow.
Stand by. And all these screens will light up. We give them a second to, just like starting up a computer, give them a second to warm up, and then we can start running all of our pre-flight checks before we take our flight.
We are already here on the runway, and there's a lot less, maybe chatter is the word, from the flight deck, right?
Yeah.
Because it's just a different environment, and it's immediately much quieter too.
You feel these engines?
Wow.
Yeah, they're serious.
Wow. So what's like the cruising altitude on a plane like this?
This airplane will go, depending upon the weight, will go straight into the middle 40s.
What?
Yeah, straight up.
Mid-40s?
Yeah, no, it's straight up.
And it can hold it there? Like
Holds there, yeah, it'll go up. I think the service is 51. We never go that high, but you can go into the 40s all day long. We took off from here the other day from this airport, and we went to the coast of North Carolina, and we landed in, I think it was 3 hours 40.
So Brian, we're standing next to a slightly smaller airplane here. What is this?
This is a Citation jet.
Okay.
Known as a CJ. We affectionately refer to it as a Barbie jet.
A Barbie jet.
Yeah, and it's just a little bitty thing. This will carry, interestingly enough, 6 people.
Okay.
If you go single pilot, it'll actually carry 7. We never do that. Most of the time, it's 2 people on this airplane. Being here in Southern California, most of these trips are to Phoenix, Vegas, sometimes Sacramento. Occasionally, we'll go to Denver in them, but not much farther than that.
Interesting.
The airplane has the fuel. I've actually taken this airplane to Dallas, and it'll do it, but it's a little bit squishy when you get there. You're right at what we call minimum fuel.
So Brian also buys and sells these aircraft, and as I understand it, we were talking a little bit off camera, it is not at all like buying a car.
No, it's not even close. So this airplane behind us was built in '98, and it looks just like the airplane that just rolls off the assembly line by a year or two, but the difference in value, where this airplane we paid about $1.7 million for, a brand new airplane is probably worth $4.5 million.
Wow.
The documentation is really what you're buying when you buy the airplane, and it takes, in most cases, days to go through all of the records to make sure the airplane's been maintained properly, that all the inspections have been done.
Wow.
And it's crazy.
So because of that, is it like the automotive world where the plane will depreciate quickly and then level out, or what does the depreciation curve look like?
Generally speaking, it does that, where
Okay.
it will start out high and it'll drop down to a point, and then after that it's market driven. This aircraft started out kind of in that $3-ish million when it was brand new, dipped down into the, we'll call it the low millions, and then interestingly enough, because of COVID, everybody moving out of the airlines and into these, this airplane actually ran up in value by about 30% over a year, and now it's starting to drift down again.
Yeah.
But it's interesting how it's affected the market and the value of the airplanes. And generally speaking, 10% of the market's for sale. So there's about 900 of these airplanes through the various iterations. So you would expect to find about 90 for sale.
Interesting.
There's a point where there were only 4 or 5 of these for sale.
Wow.
As little as a year ago.
Was so
because
high.
the demand was so high.
So when we're talking about like the condition of a plane, we talked about like the documentation. Is there any advantage to buy a new plane? Because if the documentation has to be so well kept.
Well, I'm going to come at you from a purely 135 perspective, and we're designed to make money with the aircraft. So I'm going to say no to the new airplane, only because the new airplane is about 3 times the value of this airplane, and one can't get that aircraft to cash flow. But there are a lot of people out there that would prefer a brand new airplane. They're not looking to make money with the airplane. They're just looking to move their families around, and they'll go out and buy the new one. But this airplane, because it's maintained at the level it is, this airplane is no less safe than a brand new one.
What about the lifespan?
There is none. So, as an example, the Gulfstream, they will tell you that there are no life-limited components on the airframe. That means that there's nothing built into the airplane that says at 25 years the airframe is no longer good. There are components that are attached to the airframe, the wings, the attach points, the landing gear. As an example, the landing gear on the Gulfstream is due every 5,000 cycles. The airplane we've got in pre-buy right now, that airplane was built in '02, so we're about 20 years and it's only had 5,000 landings. They're doing the first 5,000 cycle inspection on it, so it's taken that long to get there. They'll take that airplane completely apart and put it back together, and it'll go another 20 years, and then after that they'll do it again and it'll go another 20 years.
Wow. Now, Brian, you've been doing this for a couple of decades.
Long time.
Yep. How has the industry changed? How have the planes changed? And how have the wants and the needs of the clients changed?
Well, so in the early days, the 80s, 70s, before that, there were really only 4 jets, which was a Learjet. So, and they had such a following that if anybody saw a corporate airplane in the sky, it was always a Learjet. That's how prevalent they were. So there was the Learjet, the Citation, the Challenger, and the Gulfstream. So there's basically only 4 really corporate jets, and the customer base was generally businesses, Fortune 500 type people, and then very high net worth individuals. The current case now is most of those clients are high net worth entrepreneurs that do such a wide range of stuff it would boggle your brain. You know, because I'm always interested in that kind of stuff when you're walking the customer out to the aircraft and you find out what they do and you just go, God, why didn't I think of that? You know, it's crazy. I mean, we had a guy that was making Swatch watch covers, you know, and all kinds of stuff. So that's, and not as much Fortune 500. You know, those guys have got their own equipment now, but from a charter perspective, we don't fly them as much.
Have there been have you had to implement new technologies like Wi-Fi into the planes?
Yes.
Yeah.
So this airplane is actually equipped with Wi-Fi.
Okay.
So above 10,000 feet, the Wi-Fi turns on just like on the airline. The difference with this Wi-Fi is my phone will work. I can call the office.
You can make a phone call.
And you can make a phone call.
Wow.
Or somebody can call you. So your phone rings. They don't know that you're in an airplane. The phone just rings through. You can also, I've done FaceTime calls. I've done Zoom calls. And it's all because we're the only ones on the airplane. And we've got the same bandwidth that the bigger airplanes do.
Right.
So it works, makes everybody much more efficient. Interesting side note, when Wi-Fi first came out, the customers weren't that enthusiastic about it. They said, you know what, this is the only time I get to be in my thoughts. Interestingly enough, the average load that we take is 5 people, and they're generally going to a meeting. So this is a workspace. So the guys are working, they're thinking about the meeting they're going to, and they didn't want to be bothered. But as Wi-Fi became more user-friendly, if you will, now they insist that there be Wi-Fi. They want to stay in touch with their office. I get texts all the time from customers halfway across the country saying, hey, I forgot to tell you this.
Right.
So it just makes, it's just another extension of the workday, if you will.
Wow, Brian. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
What an amazing experience. Easily one of the best I've ever had. And if folks want to get a hold of Premier Air Charter, how do they do so?
It's premieraircharter.com. It's pretty straightforward.
Wonderful. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us on this adventure. It was an amazing peek behind the curtain.
Thank you.
And we'll see you on the next one.